Alright, so this is a new series I want to start as a little side thing to do whenever I'm not in the mood for actual writing or drawing. I first want to, of course, give a disclaimer that this series I will not be using a script for any of this, so everything is unscripted. Therefore, you can expect some halts and uhs. So what I want to do in this series is something I've wanted to do since probably 2013, but I thought I should probably wait a few years to kind of create that sense of nostalgia, I suppose. I've always wanted to analyze all the chapter illustrations of my works in chronological order. Of course, that means that while I do intend to examine the illustrations of Engelreich and Shrouded Piety, those are chapter illustrations that come all the way in 2016, and if I'm doing this in chronological order, that means we start off with the illustrations of Part 1 of F-Zero Seppuku, 2013. Therefore, this will, for quite a while, be an F-Zero Seppuku exclusive series for the most part. With that said, I will get right underway and see how this goes. As an aside, I want to mention that my microphone as of this recording is kind of at the end of its life, so there could be a few little technical issues with the microphone, but for the most part, I don't think it will be a problem. I am just clarifying this. Okay, so the start of the history of the chapter illustrations is going to get kind of a rocky start because there's actually some unrevealed secrets to the process, but there's also some context that's needed. So a lot of people who started off with Seppuku back from 2013 Revival Day will know this, but the prologue here actually wasn't originally part of F-Zero Seppuku. This is a 2015 invention created, I think right after the story ended, I believe. So this was actually not originally in the story. The prologue was later thrown in just for the sake of consistency, since Part 2 and Part 3 had prologues. That said, there really is no illustration for prologue yet. One day I think there will be, but for now, the prologue actually just has this generic picture here from a 4th gen Chia, but no illustration for this, and by extension obviously no 1st gen drawing because it was a 2015 invention. So we kind of move past that and go to Lap 1. This was the actual first chapter of Seppuku, and this was, from the beginning, the first picture ever used for a Seppuku chapter. So obviously there's a problem here too, is that this isn't technically a illustration designed for the chapter. This is just the concept drawing of Lieutenant Seppuku, and that was pretty much it. It's not actually a chapter illustration necessarily, it's just an existing image being used as one. This is because back when I started F-Zero Seppuku, of course, the illustration system didn't exist yet. At the time, that would have been unthinkable to give every chapter its own illustration, so this was just a picture I had that I was proud of that I happened to just use to represent this. By all means, there's a great chance that I might have originally been planning to just use this same picture for every chapter. Very likely. I wouldn't know, but I think there's a great chance that I might have just been so proud of this picture when I made it that I might have just used it for every chapter. But Lap 1 was not where the illustration system started, so we again move past there. Where things get more interesting, though, then is Lap 2. Now, currently on DeviantArt, the illustration for Lap 2 is clearly not 1st gen, it's just this kind of crappy looking 4th gen drawing. And originally we have, this is a remake obviously of this, so the actual original image used for Lap 2 was this, and many would regard this to be where the idea of the chapter illustration started. That is how I've pushed it, at least. Now there's something I need to mention. When marketing a story, there's a lot of exaggerations and little lies. Now, even though I've said that this is the original chapter illustration where it started, that's actually not true. This is not the first chapter illustration. Again, it's an image being used to represent the chapter and does depict a scene in Part 2. But the difference is what we currently see in Lap 2, that is an illustration designed for this chapter. This was not actually. This was not drawn for the chapter. This was actually from something else, and I will show what it is now. What this actually came from was a video I made back in 2013 that was basically just a reading of Lap 2 and then, author's thoughts on it. Somewhere in the video, while reading it, I was providing drawings, and somewhere along the line, we get to... Yeah.
What's a pretty flower like you doing in a place like this? She was looking at him confused. The term flower threw her off because of her last name being...
So, that's where this actually originates from. It's not a chapter illustration. It was a picture I drew to be used in this video here. So the apparent first ever illustration actually was just to be used in a reading of the lap. Later on, though, when looking for something to throw in as an illustration, I ended up just using what I used in the video here, so it kind of became the first ever illustration. But again, the fact remains, it was not drawn for the chapter, it was drawn for a video here. So the drawing itself, though, obviously low quality. People who have been with me for a while will know that I often bring this up as an example of, where we started and where we are currently. Obviously the quality is pretty embarrassing. Chia, her bangs, actually, it's kind of interesting, though. Her bangs are somewhat like they are currently, but there is this thing about Chia's bangs where it's always been 2 long bangs on the right side of her face, 1 small one that doesn't touch her eye, and then 1 that goes past her eye. That's seen here, but the hair actually is kind of similar length, so it's not quite developed yet to the point where like the hair has that pattern. This is ultimately quite the... I don't really know if this was a really hard effort or not. It's obviously not as good as the, Chia. It's not as good as her concept drawing. Her shoulders are very blocky. If you take away her head and just kind of look at her body, it's pretty much just like a loaf of bread. And I don't know if that's supposed to be her whole arm. I kind of think those are fingers there, so I think this is supposed to be her whole arm and hand, but that's pretty bad. And of course, most people would laugh at Earl. Now, one special thing you could say about this drawing is this might very well be the earliest drawing of Earl in existence that we know of, which I don't know if you could make the argument that perhaps this is actually the concept drawing of Earl Benduck, but I'm not really sure about that. I don't think so, because the skin color appears to be what it currently is today, and I know originally Earl's skin color was more of a peach color. So I think this comes after the missing illustration of Earl, but yes, this, in any case, is probably the earliest image we have of Earl. It's a very low effort. I mean, you can definitely treat it as the first chapter illustration of F-Zero Seppuku, but the simple fact of the matter is it was not drawn for the purpose of the chapter. Alright, so there's just one more we have to talk about that's kind of odd before we can get to the actual, good content. So this is the illustration for Lap 3, and this, well, illustration, not really, but I guess there is one thing I can say, though, is that, this obviously wasn't a picture designed for the chapter, but there is an argument to make. This is obviously just the concept design for Chia Flower, the first ever drawing of Chia. So nothing special or unique to the chapter. However, you can make one argument. It's that the original drawing does include the purring kitten and even give it a name. This version, the purring kitten has been removed and there's not even a mentioning of the purring kitten anywhere, just Chia Flower. So an argument can be made that at least this was clearly edited for use for the chapter, because I was clearly trying to avoid spoilers. But that's all I can really say for this. It's obviously just the concept design, but with the purring kitten removed from the picture. And that's about it for Lap 3. So finally we get to the first ever chapter illustration of the Siontix Realm. Lap 4 of F-Zero Seppuku is where the idea came about that I should make a picture for every chapter. Of course, as you would imagine, at the time I thought this to be an impossible task, so I really wasn't officially entertaining the idea of doing a picture per chapter, but I was at least going to give it a shot, and we start off here with Lap 4 with a drawing of Michael Chain busting down the wall of the bar called Rough Odds. As you can see here in Properties, we do get an official date, and we see that the first ever Siontix Realm illustration was created on Friday, August 9, 2013, about 2 months ago exactly from Revival Day. So that was at 8:50 p.m. So yeah, that gives you an idea of how long we went actually without the chapter illustration system. I certainly don't remember this time very well, but this does imply that we went almost 2 months of non-stop F-Zero Seppuku chapters without having illustrations. So at one point in time, all these chapters were naked and had no pictures. But as of August 9, it seems to have come to me that we should try making a picture for every chapter, and we start with Lap 4. I will say what makes me curious is the fact that I didn't go back and make illustrations for Lap 1, 2, and 3. I guess I was content with those stand-in pictures I used for those chapters. I don't know why, because nowadays I think it would have been better just to go back and make pictures for every chapter, but I left 1, 2, and 3 alone and just started off in Lap 4. So this is then officially one of my first ever drawings I did for F-Zero Seppuku. Part 1. This depicts again the scene where Chia Flower and Lieutenant Seppuku meet for the second time in the bar Rough Odds in Part 1, and they have a talk, and then the Bloody Chain attack Rough Odds to try and kill Seppuku. And this is the moment where Michael Chain blows a hole in the wall and approaches Seppuku with his, I forget what the assault rifle type's called, but yeah, basically AK-47. Now, right away, there's a few things you can definitely tell. So this isn't going to surprise anybody, but obviously this was traced. I mean, come on. For a first ever drawing, I'm not even saying this is good, but you can kind of tell for a first ever drawing, this obviously wasn't coming from my head. This obviously was traced, probably from a bodybuilder, I imagine, and then obviously just colored it to look like Michael Chain. AK-47, just the way it's kind of presented, how it's just a flat image. I have to think, yeah, for sure that was definitely traced from an AK-47, but the colors were made fully metal. One of the unique things that came from this, though, that we still do to this very day, is Chain's muscle shirt in F-Zero Seppuku, unlike all the other canon versions of him, says something in Japanese, and I am quite certain to this day it just says chain. I am pretty sure that's all it says is chain. To this day, I'm pretty sure we use this exact same thing when I draw Michael Chain even today. I think the latest Revival Day drawing still has him wearing this, but I don't know what it says. I'm pretty sure it says chain. That sounds like something. It could say bloody chain, but I think it's just chain, probably. I'm pretty sure the only thing then that wasn't traced in this image, aside from the background, is probably the face. That's probably the only thing that wasn't traced, and obviously that's nothing to boast about. It's pretty bad. But in any case, I did this illustration, and I must have been pretty happy with it, because we obviously continued to do illustrations after this, but the beginning of the illustration system starts August 9, 2013 at 8:50 p.m., and you can therefore say the first ever character depicted in a Siontix illustration is Michael Chain. Alright, Lap 5. So now comes one of the bigger challenges. This would have been the second time ever drawing Chia Flower, I believe. Well, actually, no, that's not true, because we made the one video. Okay, this wasn't the second time drawing Chia, but this is one of the first times drawing Chia Flower in just a full body, for the most part, way. And we can see that this was made Saturday, August 10th at 2 in the morning. So, a little more than a day after making my first ever illustration, I dared to make another, and it was going to depict Chia. The first thing you gotta note that's interesting is that it's actually not the worst looking drawing for the time. In fact, I might even say this is one of the better Part 1 drawings. I don't think there's anything very bad with it. It's just kind of awkward compared to like nowadays, but what I can say that's interesting is if you open up the concept drawing for Chia Flower, you can clearly see that there's actually quite the inspiration. So, that distracted me. Okay, if you just compare these two, it's very clear to see that I must have been looking at this a lot while drawing this, so I obviously needed a reference of Chia, and in truth, there's not a lot different between these two. I think the original drawing is obviously better, but for the most part it mostly stays the same. The only difference I really see is that the lines on her collar part turtleneck part is more spaced out, same with her beanie hat. Another thing though we do see that's interesting is we can tell that in the original concept drawing for Chia, her bangs, you can just barely see the one on her left side, whereas in this one we actually see something closer to what we currently see to this day, where it's, you know, down there touching her eyebrow. I think that one of the most important things about this drawing was that this was probably the moment to decide whether Chia's final colors were going to be what they are. And if you compare the two images, it's pretty clear that I just borrowed the exact same colors. Yeah, see, it's like pretty much the same thing exactly. So I clearly didn't guess Chia's colors, I just used what was from the original, and to this very day we still use the colors from the original. So had I decided to try different colors, then we might have seen different colors on Chia even today, but with this illustration it would seem evident that I just wanted to keep the exact same colors. The other big change though is there's clearly a change in the sleeves. Originally we see Chia had these I don't know what you'd call this, they're like halfway length sleeves, I guess, whereas in this drawing we officially see what Chia would become today, where it's pretty much just t-shirt sleeves. So I don't know what prompted that. At some point I clearly decided that Chia sleeves should just be regular t-shirt size, whereas in the original concept they were much larger and seemed to have those lines kind of separating them. So that's something you can definitely grant the Lap 5 illustration, is that it seems to have revolutionized what would become the basis for Chia Flower. Now the illustration itself depicts the scene at the very end. I don't know if in edited F-Zero Seppuku, if this is still even how the scene's presented, but I believe this is representing the moment in Lap 5 when Chia agrees to sign up with Team Seppuku, and I believe she saluted Seppuku. I don't know if that saluted part's still in the chapter, I should check, but this would by extension be the first time we get to look at Seppuku's office, and you can definitely tell minimal effort was put into his office. I mean, the background is literally just a gradient, and his desk, very interestingly, his desk is a reddish brown. It seems that the implication is that his desk was wooden, but every single depiction of Seppuku's desk that I know of to this very day, I believe, has portrayed it as being metal. But it looks like at the time I was going for a wooden desk. It's kind of interesting. But yeah, this was obviously, I think, aside from the changes that Chia went through and such, I think the biggest thing to look at here is that the background was so simple. There was just nothing put in as effort, not even a door or anything, or any pictures. So it really shows that I was not confident enough to even try with a background at the time. And I think that's pretty much all you can really say about this picture. There's not much to it since there's no background. The desk is just a solid rectangle, and she is pretty much just a slightly different version of her concept drawing. So Okay, so this one's actually a big deal, because here's the shocker. This illustration came only 13 hours after the last one, and already we see quite a lot of changes, actually. Now, one of the biggest changes we see right away is, you may notice with the original concept drawing of Chia that we do have shading. We have kind of like prototype shading used, at least on the torso and the pants, but nowhere else for some reason. But nonetheless, we did have shading back then. But as of this chapter, it looks like I, for the most part, gave up on that, because the only place you can see shading is there for some reason. But nonetheless, this is actually a very shocking change, because this clearly wasn't inspired from the original drawing. That she's facing a different direction, she's making a different face, her beanie hat's looking different, her hair's looking different. Yeah, it's and then we have Earl, of course. That, I think, is going to be the main part of this image, is that this is clearly the you know, we don't know what the concept art for Earl looks like since it's missing, but in any case, I think this is, for the most part, going to be pretty much the basis for what Earl would become. Obviously, he was much different looking, but funnily enough, I think even though he was not officially a Korean yet when I made this illustration, it's kind of funny to say that I almost think his eyes have that Asian look a little bit. Because I think at this point he was probably still being thought of as American or Canadian or whatever, but I think this is actually one of the more Asian looking Earls. This is definitely important for Earl, though, because we got his color palette pretty much. These are the same colors we use to this day and like Revival Day and such, so that was a big deal. One of the interesting things we notice with the Earl drawing compared to today is, back then, well, of course, Earl had the little hairs going on with his facial hair, but, you know. But one thing that kind of disappeared at some point was there used to be these cargo pockets going on in his pants. We actually don't see that much anymore, I don't think. Same with this line going across his pants. I don't know what that was about. And he had a golden zipper for a while. I think the golden zipper stays for most of part 1, but we definitely don't see a golden zipper today when we draw Earl, so that's a big difference. The scene itself, this is depicting the moment when Earl shows Chia the chassis of what would eventually become the purring kitten. So it's not complete yet, it's just a piece of junk pretty much that can't, you know, even turn on. But I suspect this depicts the moment where they walked into the garage and Chia was quite taken away by the sight of this chassis. Obviously this is meant to be kawaii, but it kind of came out looking really weird. So it's probably the first time ever then that I did a drawing with a comical face. This obviously is much different from anything we see nowadays, where she only had some dots for eyes. The weird thing I don't understand is the puckered lips and open mouth look. That is really weird. Because if I were going to do this today, I think I would always just that. I don't know why didn't I do that? I think that looks a lot more normal. Like it's kind of creepy when it's like that. When it's like this, it looks actually kind of good though. I don't know. But yeah, I think this moment this moment definitely depicts the moment Chia saw her what would become her machine one day, but I just think the mouth thing's kind of creepy. I don't really understand the background, to be honest, though. It can at least be credited to me that I was trying a little more with the background, but not very much, because like the other drawing, you can technically make the argument that once again it's just a gradient background of a rectangle somewhere. Last time the rectangle was Seppuku's desk, this time it's something over here. I don't know what that is. I think this was my poor attempt to create some kind of 3D effect, maybe? It might be a wall or something. I don't know. I really don't even agree with this. I think it really just should have all been gradient, because it's just confusing and annoying. But Once again, I don't know if there's much more to say. It's another simple one, but there's a little more to say, at least, with how Chia looks and Earl's, of course, debut. So the illustration for lap 7 comes only 5 hours after the last one. So between 3 o'clock and 8 o'clock, I had been working on this, I guess, which, yeah, it's one we've laughed about over the years. It's obviously a very bad image, but there's actually a lot, though, you can praise me for in this one. At least, for one, I moved away from the gradient background. Finally, we had something that wasn't just a plain gradient background. And it at least attempted very, very poorly to depict a room. Of course, the problem is that it's not making any sense. You can see the ceiling, and yeah, it's not really working. It's really bad. But you know, at least I tried, and it was a learning experience, I'm sure. But this is actually what I would call I would call this a very important one for 2 reasons. First of all, this was the first time I ever did a rear view drawing of a character. This was just one generic goon of Michael Chain's, or Red Star's. Or was it Red Star? Oh man, I forgot. Red Star. Yeah, it's Red Star. Okay, so this is a Red Star goon that's based off the ones you see in F-Zero, or not, sorry. Based off the, where is this, I don't know, whatever. It's a gangster, basically, inspired by the ones you see in the video game F-Zero GX, hence the kind of palish gray skin. So that was something. It was the first time I drew something from a behind view, and it kind of came off a little awkward looking for sure. The hands obviously are very poor. I don't really understand the muscles going on here, but yeah, and then I don't think he has an ass really. It's just kind of flat. So take that for what you will. But I think the most important thing here is that this was the first ever time we see kind of a bad drawing of Chia, whereas this is kind of a weird drawing of her. I look at this and I have to say I think the eyes are weird. I think the nose is, yeah, the nose isn't correct. She has more of a sandwich nose, while this is like some kind of weird angle. And then she has some very defined eyebrows. That's very odd. And I think the beanie hat's just not working. It's very small. I don't know. It doesn't really feel like a beanie hat at that point. So, oh, and the neck. Something's going on there. It's just fierce. But why I think this is important. Oh, one more thing actually first. Another interesting thing is that we see the return of those lines actually between the arms and the torso. Kind of weird, because that's what we saw in the concept drawing of Chia, but then it looks like as of lap 4, I think we saw those lines disappear, so I don't know why they came back. That's weird. But anyways, why this is important is because this is a problem that I face even today. There's always just these times where you're doing an illustration and just for the most random reasons, it looks like you're drawing a different character. I still do this today in Engelreich of Tamako all the time, where sometimes I'll draw a character that does not look like Tamako. So this appears to be the first time ever I drew a character that didn't look like Chia. It's like Chia was sick and had a different actor that day, because this is very different looking. And I really don't know what the difference or what the problem is. I don't think it's the mouth. I really feel strongly that the problem here was something to do with the eyebrows. In fact, I'm almost certain that's what it is. I think that was the problem. I mean, it's still weird looking, but I think at the end of the day, definitely the problem seems to have been... There's more than one thing wrong with this Chia drawing, but something. I think those eyebrows really aren't helping. They're a little too thick and long. And then, you know, this could be said this is important because this is one of the first times I drew a character sitting down, and to this very day I don't think I've really attempted this again. I really hate drawing characters sitting down, so I'm usually cheap and will always have something in front of them, like a desk or something, or another character. I gave it a shot here, and I think this was about as good as it could have been for my skill back then. But then the feet are also kind of odd. I don't know, the boots really just feel like an extension of her legs. They don't really get smaller or anything. And just looking at it, I feel like if you could see a little more, I feel like the feet would be really fat. It just looks like that's where it's going. It looks like the feet are really fat, like bigger than her face. And and the chair itself, I don't know what the heck's going on with those chair legs, but that does not look right. Anyways, though, this illustration depicted the moment when Chia was on an operation to steal some, I believe she was looking for an engine, a reactor, and a combat module for the F-Zero machine she was aspiring to make, and she gets captured by Red Star. It is Red Star, yes, because this was at the Red Star lot. And while there, Chia gets captured and tied up. And now here's something interesting. I am pretty sure this scene was depicting a now defunct moment where they were threatening to rape her. Now, not many people will remember this since this was edited out, but in the original version of F-Zero Seppuku, like the very original, before September of 2013, there were a lot of rape jokes and threats in Part 1. Because for some reason I was in that phase where I kind of thought rape in stories was really interesting. So I'm pretty sure when I was drawing this, the message I was trying to convey is that Chia was reacting to threats of rape by muscular gangsters. That is not in the chapter anymore. I actually hate doing that now, so I tend not to really talk about rape much in stories. But it still works, kind of. Even if this was a scene depicting a rapey moment, it still works, even without it, because it just clearly shows a Red Star guy threatening Chia, and yeah, she's scared, so I think the illustration survives. Last thing I can really say about this is some kind of tattoo there. You know, I don't want to sound like an idiot here, but I kind of think that might have said something in Japanese, but I don't know if that's the full word or if that's gibberish or whatever. It kind of has some appearance that I think kind of reminds me of Japanese, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably quite the mixture, really. I think this chapter illustration, it introduced some qualities, but it also really failed at some things, such as Chia. Last thing I can say, a very petty matter. I noticed that her boots are very gray. That is definitely not the color her boots are supposed to be, so I can tell clearly that I did not pick the colors from the concept art. I obviously just picked a color myself, so I can tell just by looking at that that is not the correct color of Chia's boots. And that's about it. Okay, so lap 8. This is where the momentum seems to be starting, because despite that last illustration being pretty poor, I did this one only 3 hours later, so I clearly was not jarred by the lack of quality of the last one. And to my credit, this actually might have at the time been my greatest illustration, because I can remember clearly enough that I did not trace this one. This was not a traced image. And this is actually some pretty good arm folding, I think, well, considering for the time. I'm not sure I understand some of the muscle parts, but I think the arm folding, I think it's working pretty well, actually. So I'm actually going to start, for some consistency, I'm actually going to start off talking about the scene before the specifics of the drawing, just to keep things consistent. So this scene depicts the moment in lap 8 where Chia and Earl are captured by Brock Blazkowicz and introduced to him, and they're, I believe, tied up to chairs in his office, and he's basically telling them that they work for him now and such, and where he explains what the function of Red Star is in the lower city. That said, this is actually a very interesting picture. Now, first of all, there is one loss. It looks like maybe I wasn't confident in my ability to do backgrounds after that last one, because again, while I did experiment with a background in the last one, it wasn't that good. And as you can clearly see, this is actually the worst background yet for the most part, because this isn't even a gradient or anything, it's just a solid gray, nothing else. But you could say this is also one of the first times I put objects in the background. I have these two Red Star banners back there. And I think they worked fine. And then, of course, another significant thing that we see only in the communist aspects here is we do see the first time I use copied images. So we obviously have golden stars in the background, probably found from the Soviet Union stuff. Then we got the hammer and sickle there. Obviously, I didn't draw that. I just copy and pasted that. Same with the Red Star. Now, you can definitely tell this is copy and paste. So all you gotta do is zoom in on the Red Star here, and you can just see all that pixely content. So this obviously was not drawn by me. One of the other interesting things, I don't think we ever saw this again, and I think it worked really well here actually, is we didn't have any pupils or anything. It was just white eyes, and again, I don't think I ever did that again, even to this day, but I think that was actually a pretty effective way of depicting a villain. If he was a little closer up to his face, that probably looked weird, but since the illustration is supposed to be viewed at in this resolution, I think those pure white eyes are actually pretty intimidating. Another really interesting fact we also really never saw again was the nose. I guess you could almost say that this is actually a bad thing about today, but you know, if this was today, this isn't how we'd see his nose. We'd see something a little more to the effect of yeah, you know, like that. And I guess, you know, that's a subjective thing. I don't know which one you'd prefer. But that's pretty much what I would have done today, whereas back then I actually did this. So I don't know. I kind of think this is a little weird, but I think there's some kind of beauty to it. So I think it was a good call. But Brock Blazkowicz, you know, obviously not good compared to like anything else in the future, but this actually wasn't a bad drawing of him. The legs are probably the worst part. Like, I don't know what's going on there by his crotch. It almost looks like you can see his ass or something, but aside from that, I think Brock did fine. I think the banners were well placed. Chia and Earl, though. Now, Chia I got away with. Because she has long hair and I could kind of block her neck, but you can clearly see there was some confusion with how to handle Earl. You got a little bit of his body showing for some reason, but there's something about the head that's just not working there. I do remember clearly this was also the first time ever where I started to question whether I needed ears or not, and we'll get to the ears thing soon here, but first of all, two things. When I was drawing Brock, I realized this was an occasion where he didn't have hair on the sides, and that was making me wonder if it looked normal to not have ears if he doesn't have hair there, because I thought it looked really weird. So you can kind of I did this with Michael Chain in the first illustration, of course, but it kind of happened again here where I was looking at it. I thought maybe this needed some ears. I obviously didn't go with it. But I also, at the same time, remember I was having the same debate with Earl here where I kind of thought he needed ears. But again, I didn't go with it. And I think the lack of ears might actually be why this turned out kind of awkward looking over here, because I didn't have the ears to kind of guide me and tell me where the hair is supposed to go and end and whatnot. Yeah, I think... I wouldn't know, but I have a feeling that this was probably, once upon a time, my best illustration to date. Okay, so this illustration for Lap 9 is legendary. It's one of the best remembered Part 1 illustrations, and I'm so glad I finally get to talk about it in finer detail. This will also be one of the first times we get to like get a really close-up look at some of the details, so I'm pretty excited for this one. So this moment, really quickly, depicts the moment where we first see the Seppuku Jody rivalry. This is in part 1. So after the chapter where Chia and Earl escape from the Red Star HQ and destroy a lot of bikes in the process, Jody Summer has a complaint to file Seppuku over this after she hears it all the way from the upper city, and she summons him to the Federation HQ to answer for this, and Chia and Earl are brought along. Of course, there's not actually a scene where they glow red eyes and shoot lasers at each other, but that's pretty much what I was going for here. Now, there's obviously so much going on picture-wise. I don't even know where to start. Now, first of all, this is the first ever illustration featuring Lieutenant Seppuku. So we're gonna have to pick apart this whole thing one at a time. So we're just gonna focus on Seppuku for a moment. This is interesting. It's my first time drawing a fedora, which is funny because I used to wear one a lot. I still do, but I wore fedoras like a lot more back then, so I would have thought I would have had a better handle on how a fedora looks. Interestingly enough, there's all those white pixels around his fedora, which makes me think that I might have traced this fedora. I would be extremely shocked, but yeah, I actually think I might have traced that fedora. I might have been so lacking in confidence. I'll just get right to it because I'm sure everybody's probably, thinking about this, but yes, there is an ear. This is one of the only Siontix drawings in general using the gen system that has an ear. So this might be one of the only times we ever saw Lieutenant Seppuku with an ear. Another thing, his nose, that's not how noses look anymore. It never really has been. What an ear or nose usually looks like on a character back then and even today is we see something a little more to the effect of this. And yeah, this is how noses look usually in the Siontix style. So if I was making this today, that's how it probably would have looked. But no, this is actually, for some reason, it looks like that. You can also tell, though, this is also kind of a testament to how Seppuku changes the characters. You can see his scarf used to be massive. Like, this scarf is almost like the size of his head, and it doesn't show any of the neck. It covers his chin completely. You can barely see his mouth. Another thing, his hair. His hair is much brighter back then. That is a much different because now today I believe it's something much paler and darker. I'm pretty sure this is the difference, something to this effect. So his hair at some point had like a massive transformation in color. But for some reason back then I went with a hair color that's almost like Jody Summers. Like, look at this. So let's take Jody's hair color over here. And one's brighter than the other, but it seems like they're the same types of browns, just one's darker than the other. Very weird. I'm kind of lucky we survived. Kind of surprised we didn't get a theory or something that Seppuku and Jody were like siblings or something, because I don't know, hair colors are very similar. And I think that's all to say about Seppuku. Jody Summer, another interesting one. This is the first time I ever drew Jody Summer, and to this day I still suck at drawing Jody. She's always been one of the worst characters ever for me. Here's the part nobody's gonna believe. I've never mentioned this before, but you won't believe this, but I actually traced Jody here. I don't know how, but even though I traced this, I still somehow ended up making a horrible drawing of her. I don't remember what I traced it off of. I am pretty sure what I did was I took a picture of Jody from the anime, and I traced her hair. And then I traced actual female's head. So I think this is actually the head of an actual female, and I put the hair on top of it. And then I drew an ear and the details and whatnot, but, wow, and that neck is crazy, dude. That is not good. I don't know where the colors are coming from either. don't remember Jodie ever being pink and bright purple violet. I usually remember her being kind of a red and pink. I don't remember her being purple. Kind of interesting. But yeah, this was Jodie Summer. There's a lot of people that probably wouldn't even know this is Jodie unless like they read the chapter, because this really doesn't look like Jodie Summer if you ask me. And of course, that also means Jodie Summer is also one of the only characters to have ever had an ear drawn on her. Which takes us to this. This is the first ever chapter illustration in the Siontix Realm to do chibis, and this is still a style we use today. We haven't changed. The only thing that's really changed with the chibi style is that the heads are a little smaller nowadays, but you can see that it's actually pretty, yeah, it's pretty much the same as what we see today. I mean, you can obviously tell this is an older chibi, but yeah, this is the first time we ever saw chibis used in an illustration. And I think they were used pretty effectively. You can clearly tell that Chia's the one kind of freaking out, and Earl has that face that's kind of saying, oh, he's doing this again. So I think this actually was a really, 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 really well done implementation of chibis, because they're getting the point across. Chia can't believe what she's seeing. Earl can believe it because he's already seen this happen before. I think that was really good usage of the chibis. And I think beyond that, all I can say is I personally would have done more of a background, but I know what my excuse was back then. My excuse was that since it's a chibi moment in the background, I was justified in having a cartoonish, simple background, so that's where that comes from. I also might have been in the mindset that I put so much work into this and that and that and that maybe I just didn't have to have a background because I already put so much work into everything else. I definitely disagree with not going for a background, but I think it works. Nothing much to say, but this is also the first time we used the little fumes to represent anger. I still do that to this day, but I think that was done really badly. But you can actually tell if you think back to like modern Engelreich chapters and such, I still do this. This is still a style I do to represent anger or sorrow. So this is a pretty legendary picture, and it's been one that's also been kind of joked about. I think when most people look at this one, they're always freaked out by the fact that there's ears in it, and that's pretty much what makes it legendary. But this is definitely one of the most popular Part 1 illustrations. Okay, so the final illustration we're going to do in this video is lap 10. This actually, this is an interesting, very interesting case, because the non-F-Zero fan might look at this illustration and be like, wow, that's really good. But the thing is, the F-Zero fan might look at this and see trash, and that's because this is very clearly a trace. And every F-Zero fan probably knows what images I used. This is clearly just the common Blue Falcon image used in GX. This is obviously the common Blood Falcon image. It's clearly traced. But I will say this. It was at least a pretty cool trace. I mean, I think I did pretty good at the lighting on like the sides and everything, so I'll give it that. I didn't do it for the Bloodhawk, though, which I think kind of ruins it. If I would have done as well with the Bloodhawk as I did with the Blue Falcon, I think this would have worked better, but I only did it with the Blue Falcon for some reason. Also, that gradient on the Bloodhawk is so bad. Anyways, though, first of all, this this might I think this depicts the Casino Palace race, race 2 of part 1, I think. And I believe this was then the first chapter to properly show the reader that there's like a little Falcon rivalry, which is probably why I highlighted this. I kind of actually, when I think about it, from what I remember that scene, I think there's other things I think that deserve to be drawn other than this. But for some reason, I went with this. The drawings of Captain Falcon and Blood Falcon, I wish I could also take credit for those, but again, traced. However, I will say that even though I traced it, I still managed to screw up somehow, because the non-F-Zero fan might not notice this right away, but Captain Falcon is actually missing something kind of essential. You see, he is supposed to have something like that. Yeah, he's missing something there. By extension, Blood Falcon is missing something, I believe, like that. So right there I made a mistake, but they're traces, but I actually did something interesting. I actually remember this quite well. So the thing about this is I did trace these, however, I kind of did a combination of GX and VP Legend. I forget what I did exactly, but the full images of these actually use elements both from GX and the anime, and I kind of combined them into one. Again, I forget which elements those are, but I guess all I can really say, oh, there's another big problem with this. The track is hilariously small. You can just clearly see the road. The road is barely wide at all. It's a very small, thin... I mean, it can barely fit 2 machines. That's not right. So, but at least I tried. Yeah, I guess if I had to say something about this illustration, probably, in my eyes, one of the worst ones, but probably necessary. It was only a matter of time before I was going to have to do an illustration, you know, about F-Zero. But I think the reason I don't really much care for this one, of course, is that it uses so many traced things that it's just kind of pathetic. But I will say this, though. Not much credit here, but I will say this. The one thing I can say is that the rocket fire coming from the back of the machines, not bad for the time. I mean, this is crap, but I still do this style today, albeit much better. But I think this actually wasn't bad. See, it wasn't what I would have expected myself to do back then. Is I would have expected something really basic, like, okay, that would have just been something I would have expected. Like, I totally would have. Yeah. Oh, hold on, let me Okay, so I would not have been surprised back then if I would have just done something simple like boom. that is so what I think I would have done. And if not that, maybe something like that. I think that's like kind of surprising that I actually agree with what I did back then, where I made it very inconsistent, kind of fiery. And I think that was actually one of the better parts of this image. But there's not much I really like about this picture. It's pretty, yeah. Again, it just uses so many trace things that I just think this wasn't really a good one. But, yeah, that's the secret here, is that everything was traced. And with that, we will pick up on this in another video with lap 11. Alright guys, so that was my first episode of this. Again, it was a little bit of I guess, cringy. But, mostly because the challenge I faced while doing these 10 illustrations is that I'm analyzing them, but at the very same time, I'm also trying to remember the chapter they're from, which I obviously haven't read in years, and at the same time, I'm trying to, you know, talk about art. So it's a little something I get a little more used to, but I think it's turned out pretty well. But yeah, hopefully next time it'll get a little more fluid sounding. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll get back to it sooner or later.